Today on the news and why it matters, Trump, Biden, Ukraine, impeachment. Seems like there's a new reason to impeach Donald Trump every single week. We'll find out the latest today. Don't change the channel. It starts right now. Welcome to the news and why it matters. Happy Monday. I am Sara Gonzales. Glad to be back, although Jason Buttrill over here, chief researcher of the Glenn Beck program. Jason Buttrill, I heard you did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, you're sitting in my seat, I see. What's going on?
I am. I came back and they said, Sara, please don't go out of town ever again. We can't. I'm kidding.
No, I believe it.
No, I'm kidding. Thank you for filling
I was saying don't ever go out of town ever again, please.
Oh, yeah, that was you. Conservative commentator Grant Stinchfield joins us again. Thank you for being here. I love the shirt.
Thank you very much.
Love it.
Western style, since we're in town.
Yes, I love it. And Blaze.com writer Colen.
What do you think of my shirt?
It's I like the tie.
Okay.
Yeah, you're very fancy.
I'll work on it.
I'll give you that. You're very fancy. Got a lot to get into, obviously. First, we want to thank our sponsor, Relief Factor. So Relief Factor is there for those of us who might be, just living in constant pain. I know there's millions of Americans who just walk around in constant pain. Maybe you got in a car accident. Maybe you're just kind of getting up there in age. Maybe you're like Jason, you're former military, and your knees don't work as well as they used to.
Knees, back, everything was tore up really when I was in the Marine Corps. I took this literally, they say it takes maybe a week or two or something like that. I think it was about a week and a half, and I was already able to run 3 miles every single day. Just the testimonials here in the building that it's helped is absolutely amazing.
It's helped you, it's helped Glenn tremendously, which we really appreciate because it puts him in a way better mood.
Yes.
And it's also helped me as well. I was one of the ones in a car accident. So if you're just living in pain, realize it doesn't have to be that way. Just try the Quick Start Pack. It's 3 weeks. They get you 3 weeks of the supplement, I guess you would call it, and it's $19.95. 70% of the people who try that, they keep going on to buy more. That's how many people it's working for. It can work for you. It's definitely worth a shot because let me tell you, it's life-changing when you get out of pain. You can go to relieffactor.com or you can call 800-500-8384. That's relieffactor.com. So, Jason, being that you are the chief researcher here at Blaze Studios in Dallas, run through, if you will, the latest scandal involving President Trump when it comes to Joe Biden and what was going on with his dealings in Ukraine with his son Hunter.
So, do you want to know about the most recent stuff?
I want to know about the most, because I'm going to assume everyone pretty much knows that Joe Biden went in, pressured certain people in the Ukraine to not look into Hunter Biden's business dealings in the Ukraine. Right?
Okay.
So we've got that established.
So last week, and that story pretty much died by and large. It went to the
because
media
the mainstream media doesn't want to report on something negative about Joe, right?
Which is insane. The New York Times in May, I think, actually did something about this. We were talking about it back in April, and there was just only a couple of journalists, John Solomon, Peter Schweizer. They had talked about this and were begging people to look into it. New York Times did something in May. I think ABC might have done something, and then it just completely went away. And it's interesting because the mainstream or establishment Democrats, I think, don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah.
I mean, they were very happy for this to go away. But last week there was this, I think, Washington Post story that came out, and they didn't know the context of this phone call. They didn't know what was spoken of. They didn't even know who they were talking about. But they just said that there was a promise made. A whistleblower had come forward and said a promise was made to a foreign leader, and they were freaked out. They're like, what was this promise? And they were speculating, could this have been with Vladimir Putin? Seriously, that was the first jump they went to. It took
Russian collusion.
Russian
collusion.
That's what they wanted. That's what they wanted.
Yeah.
Maybe this was the smoking gun. It took about 1 day, and the Post followed up on that and said, okay, it was with the Ukrainian president, and it had to do with him asking Giuliani, or the Ukrainian president, to work with Giuliani on looking into the Bidens and that whole corruption thing. Now, I think this is hilarious if you really follow this on the timeline. The next day after that, CNN was like, well, we haven't been able to really confirm that there was anything at all to do with the promise. So it sounds like the promise thing completely went out the window. So you wonder how this is getting mixed up. But they're like, but it still had to do with Ukraine, and it looks like he was pressuring them to help him out in the election. Well, way at the bottom of that, there is an addition to this on this story, and it says that this whistleblower, quote unquote whistleblower, didn't actually hear this personally. Didn't read it personally. He just found out about it basically floating around the hallways.
Game of telephone.
Basically, so in other words, this is a water cooler rumor. This is why, and this was another part of the scandal, that the Director of National Intelligence said, okay, we can't give this information to Congress. They're blowing that up like, oh my gosh, this must be, Trump's pressuring them not to give this away. Well, no, the reason probably is because it's a rumor.
Right.
This
is unsubstantiated rumor.
This is like, hey, did you hear that Joey, got real drunk at the Christmas party last night, and hit on Susie? This is the equivalent of that, basically.
Yeah.
So it's also it explains why Nancy Pelosi is not pursuing any kind of impeachment stuff on this either, because it's full of crap.
Think about where these rumors start, though. These rumors start from deep inside the bowels of either the White House or the intelligence community. And to me, that's what's so troubling here, is if you want evidence that the deep state exists to take down President Trump, this story is all you need. Yeah. Somebody inside, as I said, the deepest bowels of government, decided that he was going to spread a rumor about President Trump that would lead to every single Democrat now calling for the president's impeachment for no reason at all, of course.
But this is why you're either right on that or it's part two, because I was thinking the same thing, and then I was like, well, this is so perfect, because the last thing establishment Democrats want right now is this to come out of the media graveyard, for them to focus in on this story. Because
it seems like it's going to backfire on them tremendously to dig up Joe Biden's dealings in Ukraine.
Right. Yeah. This is exactly what Trump would want. He'd be happy with it. All he has to do now is release the transcript of that phone conversation and just sit back and let the investigations go from there. What I'm saying is there's either something like that or an intentional leak. That's what I would have done. I've got a counterintelligence background. That's what I would have done.
And what you're saying is the reason why I think Trump is speaking so freely about it. He's not acting like he's got something to hide. He's like, sure, go ahead and look at it. Yeah. And Democrats are falling into the same mistake they did with Russia, where they hear a little bit of a rumor of something and they jump ahead and say impeach, impeach, impeach. And then the story unravels. Well, what happens? They look stupid. They look like they're wrong. But they're so desperate to impeach everybody except Nancy Pelosi that they're just going to jump on it and make the same mistake again.
And if you want evidence in all of this, the real evidence goes to Hunter Biden using the influence of his father to make millions of dollars in the Ukraine.
That's the real story.
That is. And so who do you have as a history of doing that? You've got the Clintons with a history of doing that. You've got the Obamas with a history of doing that. Absolutely. And of course, you've got the Bidens with a history of doing that.
Yeah. And still, members of Congress and the mainstream media, they want to focus on one aspect of the story and one aspect alone, impeachment. Here is what Adam Schiff had to say on CNN with Jake Tapper.
There's no chance of us persuading the Senate Republicans in an impeachment trial. They have shown their willingness to carry the president's baggage no matter how soiled its contents. But I want to make sure before we go down this road that we can persuade the public that this was the right thing to do. And part of persuading the public that impeachment is the right thing to do is making sure that the country understands that this was a last resort. Now, some of the folks that you mentioned have been embracing impeachment from the very beginning. I don't think that's useful in making the case to the public that we did this reluctantly. But the president is pushing us down this road. And if in particular, after having sought foreign assistance and welcomed foreign assistance in the last presidential campaign as a candidate, he is now doing the same thing again, but now using the power of the presidency, then he may force us to go down this road. I have spoken with a number of my colleagues over the last week, and this seems different in kind, and we may very well have crossed the Rubicon here.
Now, of course, what he's referring to, I know, what he's referring to, Jason, is the whole rumor included that President Trump pressured Ukraine by saying, I'm going to withhold foreign aid for you guys unless you look into this Joe Biden, shady business dealings. So that's what Adam Schiff was referring to there. But I noticed you had a little bit of a visceral reaction.
Well, I mean, so how he has no credibility. So in another scandal, the Russian scandal, he told us that collusion did indeed happen.
And no one ever followed up on that. He never got any consequences for, he said, I have direct evidence that Russian collusion happened.
And he's and he's talking now as if he has evidence. He's talking like he knows something we don't know about it. But as I said before, the Director of National Intelligence didn't turn the information over to Congress. Congress is pissed now because they don't have the information. So what is he speaking from right now?
You notice how
he's
talking about persuading the public, and it shows you that it's a lot more about politics and maybe influencing the election coming up than it is about actually impeaching, because they know they never get votes in the Senate to actually impeach. So it's just about creating this image of corruption that they can use in the election to campaign against Trump.
And that's what it's all about. And so if this proves anything to me, it's that CNN is willing to carry the baggage of the Democrats. No matter how soiled the baggage really is, CNN will be there to lug it around for the Dems.
Look what the consequences on this, I think, Biden might be screwed here. Because if they want to push this, by all means, I think we're all in agreement, go for it. I don't think the president did anything wrong here. I think that Biden will be outed into this, and he will be the casualty. And also, the ramifications will be who's next in the pecking order in the polls? Warren.
But I think that's what a lot in that party wants. A lot of those people in the party don't want Biden because they feel like he is too far to the right. And those who want the party to go further left would like to see somebody like Warren take over, even though she's probably not as good in the general election as Biden would be.
But I would say that, but the Pelosi wing, like the establishment, they got to feel very much more comfortable with people like Biden. You get your Justice Democrats squad, girls. I see them going all, in on.
Yeah, Biden is establishment. He's not going to go around, the establishment and go trash fellow Congress members, fellow Democratic Party members. I'm sure that's a safer bet for her.
Yeah, he's gonna play that game.
Yeah.
The Pelosi wing is losing this entire battle. I mean, there were years ago I would never have said that Nancy Pelosi is a socialist. I wouldn't have said that about Joe Biden either. I would have said they're liberal and they're far to the left. But I wouldn't have said they're socialists. Now both of them try to jump on that bandwagon because they know their left-wing faction of their party has completely taken over. There was a latest poll today that showed Elizabeth Warren is now in front of Joe Biden, which, as President Trump says, bring on any one of these candidates because it's a disaster for the Democrats.
Speaking of President Trump, I want to bring up, he had some comments about this particular scandal when it comes to his dealings with Ukraine. Today on Twitter, he said, the very thing that they are accusing President Trump of doing, I love that he refers to himself in the third person, the very thing that they are accusing President Trump of doing, which I didn't do, was actually done by Joe Biden, continues to be a double standard. These people are stone cold crooked. Also, who is this so-called whistleblower who doesn't know the correct facts? Is he on our country's side? Where does he come from? Is this all about Schiff and the Democrats again after years of being wrong? I know we go back and forth on whether or not the president should really be tweeting some of the things that he's tweeting. I personally love this. I love this. I think he's 100% right on this.
The president is the first president we have had that has lived up to every promise, that he would not change. He is the same man that campaigned for the presidency as he is while he is president. And so I think his base loves this. They love when he pokes fun at people. They love when he is out there tweeting and getting under the skin of every liberal out there. And this is what the president does best, and it has worked for him. So who am I to argue with it?
There's a strategic advantage to getting in front of these stories and not having to wait till you have a press conference or something like that. He's a rapid response team on his own. He just gets out there and says what he needs to say. And that keeps people on their toes when they're trying to nail him with something like this.
I can't think of another president that has been so under attack as Donald Trump has.
It's insane.
It's absolutely insane. You see the difference between presidents when they first get in office and 8 years later, how old they look over this. I think Trump's actually getting younger on it. He loves it.
He's just feeding off of all of the liberal tears.
He might be Benjamin Button at the end of after this presidency, and he'll be like 13 years old, I think.
And Grant, quickly before we go, I do think you bring up an interesting point about the president's base, how much they love this. I will say, though, for me, I was not the president's base, and I'm still won over by it. Not necessarily because of his tweets or whatever, but because it's so transparent that they're just going to do anything they can to paint him as being a criminal that you just can't, I mean, you can't help but just be on his side.
I will say I'm probably like a lot of Americans. It took me a little while to get to President Trump, and I went through a number of candidates, including Ted Cruz, before I got to President Trump. But once I'm there, how do you argue with what he's doing? You know, not to take his turn, but America is winning. We are, and just about everywhere you go. The economy is great, no matter what they say about the recession. The recession is another fake news story designed to bring this president down and sway the election. Where national security is tremendous. It's working. Yeah. People are working. Yeah. And so, look, I love the president. I love what he's doing, and he's got my full support and will.
Yeah. Suck it, CNN. It really is incredible. I just have to think. In case you haven't heard, there are a lot of climate change protests going on today in D.C. There was also a United Nations summit where climate change darling, I guess she is, Greta Thunberg, she had a message for the United Nations today about climate change and the state of the world. Here is what she had to say.
My message is that we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here.
Yeah, you should.
I should be back in school.
Yes, you
on
should.
the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Wow.
Yes. So there was that. And gentlemen, I'd love to get your thoughts. My initial reaction is, how dare the left put this girl, who apparently has, she's on the spectrum, right? Put her up there as some sort of beacon of truth and someone who we should be listening to as if she's some sort of climate change scientist. Seems kind of like child abuse to me, Grant.
I think her parents ought to be ashamed of themselves for putting her up there and using her as a pawn. She ought to be on a Broadway show in London because that was acting right there. She's been brainwashed.
Her parents are stage actors, by the way.
Yeah, go figure,
Are
right?
they really?
Yep.
So,
Wow.
so think about this, right? The left puts these kids up when it's convenient for them to do that, but they say you shouldn't be vaping at 18 years old, and you know, you can't own firearms at 18 years old. We don't trust you to do any of those things, but we trust you to speak to the United Nations on climate change. Give me a break.
You could tell when she started and said, we're watching you, they didn't know how to react to her. No. They don't know, what do you do with that? She's not.
There were a couple claps,
Yeah,
like
claps and
I'm not gonna
laughs,
be
and then she
threatened
looked at
by
them.
a child.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable to watch because she's being used as a mascot for this cause. And even she clearly doesn't really have any facts behind it. She's appealing to emotions. Even when she testified before, I think, Congress, she was like, I don't want you to listen to me, listen to the scientists. She doesn't have any substance to say. She's just being paraded out there to appeal to people's emotions because she's a child and she's being very emotional about it. And it's just uncomfortable and it's wrong.
And it's not just her. It seems to be, and there's, we'll get to another topic later on in the show that also involves children, but it seems to be this is the left's MO now, is to take children and weaponize them. And I worry because, especially with this particular topic, you're talking about kids who you're teaching that they are going to die soon. I mean, you heard her. We are at the beginning of a mass extinction. I can't imagine what that does to children. I want to play, there were all of these protests going on today. There was one happening in D.C. Here's what some of these kids had to say.
My future is in jeopardy. All of our futures are in jeopardy.
Baby boomers, all these people call us Generation Z, the last letter of the alphabet, because we are going to be the last generation to survive.
We have only 11 years to rectify decades of damage that we have inflicted on our planet, and only 18 months until some damages are irreversible. We do not have time to be polite. This is a revolution. We are creating this movement every day because every day of inaction drives more action from us.
Oh, okay. First of all, someone needs to tell homegirl that a mic is so you don't have to scream.
Terrifying.
You got the mic, you don't need to scream. Nobody needs to hear that. But they're really, I think that they truly believe what they're saying. They seem very anxious about it, right?
They've been brainwashed over this whole issue, as almost the entire left has been. But what I take away from this is a bunch of snot-nosed, spoiled-ass kids that are talking about extinction when we literally have Americans that are dying every day because they're going hungry in the inner city. We've got them dying of gunshot wounds in places like Chicago and Baltimore that really is an epidemic. And what do those teenagers think about watching these kids at the Capitol getting a voice, and they have zero voice when it comes to illegal guns and gun violence in their cities. And think about around the world. That other little girl wants to talk about an extinction of people. Go to Venezuela. Socialism. Go to these violent countries in Africa where people are dying and dictatorships have taken over and are literally killing people in record numbers. Yet they want to go to global warming?
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, and you think about what happened this past weekend. A bunch of the Democrat candidates were, in Iowa, eating a bunch of steak, even though they're telling us we're not allowed to eat steak. How many pounds did they cook? It was 10,000 steaks. Yeah, it's 10,000. But they want to lecture us. but they tell us we shouldn't be doing it, and then they want to lecture us on it. And then apparently, what's good for the goose is not good for the gander. Meanwhile, you have conservative activists who cleaned up 50 tons of garbage in Los Angeles over this weekend. It was a cleanup operation. It was from Scott Pressler's group, The Persistence. They cleaned up 50 tons of garbage, yet we didn't hear about that from the mainstream media at all. They had 200 volunteers and worked for 9 hours. The city of LA completely absent. Conservative activists actually, taking charge, taking action, and doing something. We don't hear about it. Aaron?
Because the climate change advocates, they don't want little things like that to get the attention. They don't want these practical, real solutions on the ground because that's not big enough. They want it to be world catastrophe, extinction, so they can use that to then enact whatever policies they want based on this, so that climate change can be an emergency, so they can do all the things that we read in the Green New Deal or whatever plans they're putting forward that they could never get done any other way except if they can convince people that the world is going to end if they don't do it.
Well, so there were some climate change protests going on in D.C. With, I guess you could call them adults. I don't know that I would really go that far. But conservatives cleaning up Los Angeles, liberals doing this. That's their climate change protest. A man, for those podcast listeners, appears to be twerking.
How are we subjecting our viewers?
And they're throwing. We cut it off before the really bad stuff. Twerking, throwing confetti. I want to know, is the confetti biodegradable? Because if not, that doesn't really go with your whole climate change environmentalist policies, right?
I might be able to get behind a twerk for the climate, though. It just not with that dude.
I was about to say,
not with that dude. What does that mean? I'm just telling you what I would be able to get behind.
What he means is, if Emily Ratajkowski wanted to twerk for climate change, Jason would be
the real question
the hell out of that.
Will you twerk for the climate, Jason?
All right, back in a minute.
Twerking for climate change.
Jason was at the start. Coming up in overtime, if you thought that the left was done weaponizing children, you're mistaken. They're not. Plenty of protests going on today, not just about climate change, but all the emotional manipulation when it comes to kids. Also, Sheila Jackson Lee introducing a gun control bill. She wants you guys to know she knows all about the AR-15. Trust me, no wrong facts. I think she just went to the range, probably. I think she's probably a really good shot.
She seems spun up on the whole everything, really, on that. So.
Well, luckily, she's the one writing the legislation that they intend to pass, of course. And by the way, if you have not yet gone to the Mercury One website and gotten tickets for the M1 ball, I suggest that you do it. I'm going to be there. I'm emceeing the event. Of course, Glenn and Tanya are going to be there. It's going to be a wonderful time for a good cause. You got to go to mercury1.org/M1ball. Go there now. Make sure to enter the raffle for that Mercedes-Benz.